my wife stated. I'm having surgery to stay childless always. I answered, your decision. Then I divorced her and married her best friend. The pregnancy news at Easter crushed her. Look, I'm not saying I'm a romantic genius or anything, but I'd like to think I can pull off a decent anniversary dinner without accidentally setting the relationship on fire. Spoiler alert, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Like, congratulations, you just won a lifetime supply of emotional baggage, kind of wrong. So there I was, sitting across from my wife Marissa at Garden and Grace, this bougie restaurant in downtown Denver where the waiters wear ties that probably cost more than my truck payment, and the menu doesn't have prices because if you have to ask, you clearly wandered in from the Applebee's down the street. The kind of place where they describe every dish like it's auditioning for a cooking show. Pan-seared Atlantic salmon with a delicate lemon butter reduction, garnished with microgreens harvested by monks under a full moon. I'm pretty sure half of it was just regular food with a French accent, but whatever. It was our 5th anniversary, and I was determined to do this right. I'd made reservations 3 weeks in advance, because apparently that's what you have to do now to eat overpriced fish in a room full of people pretending their marriages are Instagram perfect. I'd bought flowers, not just any flowers, mind you, but those fancy roses that come in a box and cost enough to fund a small country's GDP. I'd even worn the sport coat Marissa bought me last Christmas, the one that made me look like I was cosplaying as someone who knows what a 401k is. I was bringing my A game, folks. I was locked in, ready to celebrate 5 years of matrimonial bliss, or at least 5 years of successfully not burning the house down. The evening started off decent enough. Our waiter, this guy named Trevor who had the kind of carefully sculpted beard that required more maintenance than my entire body, brought out a bottle of champagne I'd pre-ordered. Not the cheap stuff either. This was the kind of champagne that fizzes with superiority. He popped it open with this theatrical flourish, like he was defusing a bomb, and poured it into glasses so thin I was afraid to breathe near them. Marissa smiled, that perfectly practiced smile she'd perfected over the years, the one she used for work functions and family photos. I should have recognized it for what it was, a warning sign wrapped in lipstick. To us, I said, raising my glass like an idiot who still believed in things like forever and happily ever after. To us, she echoed, clinking her glass against mine with all the enthusiasm of someone agreeing to terms and conditions they hadn't read. We ordered our food. She got the salmon because she'd been on this whole eating clean kick ever since her yoga instructor suggested that carbs were basically the devil in bread form. And I went for the ribeye because I'm a simple man with simple needs, and one of those needs involves beef that costs more than a car payment. The steak arrived looking like it had been blessed by Gordon Ramsay himself, perfectly cooked, seasoned like it held the secrets of the universe. This was going to be a good night. This was going to be a great night. And then Marissa opened her mouth and nuked our entire marriage in one sentence. I'm getting a hysterectomy, she said, cutting into her salmon with the casualness of someone mentioning they were thinking about getting bangs. I don't ever want kids. I'm pretty sure time stopped. Not in that romantic movie way where everything goes into slow motion and a single tear rolls down someone's cheek while a piano plays in the background. No, this was more like that moment in a horror movie when the music cuts out and you realize the killer's been in the house the whole time. My fork, loaded with a perfect piece of medium-rare steak, just hovered in midair like it was reconsidering its life choices. I blinked. Then I blinked again, because surely I'd misheard. Maybe she said she was getting a new hairstyle. Maybe she said she wanted kids. Maybe I was having a stroke, and this was just my brain short-circuiting. But no, she just sat there, chewing her salmon, looking at me with those expectant eyes like she'd just announced she was thinking about redecorating the bathroom, and not, permanently closing down the baby factory we'd discussed approximately 700 times during our engagement. Come again. I managed to croak out, my voice doing this weird thing where it climbed about 3 octaves. A hysterectomy, she repeated, slower this time, like I was a golden retriever trying to understand quantum physics. I've been thinking about it for a while. I don't want children, Rowan. I never really did. I thought I might change my mind, but I haven't. I won't. So I'm going to make it permanent. The words hung in the air between us, right next to the romantic candlelight and the soft jazz that was playing over the sound system. Somewhere behind me, I heard another couple laughing. Trevor the waiter glided past with someone else's overpriced entree. The world just kept spinning like it didn't realize mine had just stopped. Here's the thing about life-altering bombs being dropped on you during your anniversary dinner. You've got options. You can cry. You can yell. You can throw your napkin down dramatically and storm out like you're the lead in a daytime soap opera. You can beg and plead and try to negotiate like you're haggling at a used car lot. Or, and hear me out on this one, you can just not. So I looked at my wife. My wife of 5 years. The woman I'd promised to love and cherish and all that other stuff they make you say in front of everyone you know. And I said the only thing that felt honest in that moment. Your body, your choice. Her eyes widened slightly. I think she'd been expecting tears, maybe some dramatic proclamation about how we could work through this, how love conquers all, how we'd find a way. But I was fresh out of romantic movie speeches. What I had instead was clarity, the kind that hits you like a freight train made of truth and ribeye. Translation, our marriage, my exit. I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, see her trying to figure out if I was playing some kind of reverse psychology game. But I wasn't. I was just done. Done with the performance. Done with the tests I didn't know I was taking. Done with building a future with someone who'd apparently been planning a completely different one in secret. So I did the only logical thing left to do. I cut another piece of steak and ate it. Because honestly, if my marriage was ending, I wasn't about to let an $80 piece of beef go to waste. Waste not, want not, as my dad used to say. Pretty sure this wasn't what he meant, but the man raised me to finish what was on my plate, and I wasn't about to disappoint him now. Marissa just stared at me, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth, clearly not expecting this particular reaction. The rest of dinner passed in this weird, surreal silence punctuated only by the clinking of silverware and the distant murmur of other couples who probably weren't actively watching their marriages implode over microgreens and lemon butter reduction. When Trevor brought the check, I paid it without a word. Tipped him 20% because it wasn't his fault my wife had just detonated our future. We walked to the car in silence, drove home in silence, and went to bed in silence. And somewhere between the expensive sheets and the decorative pillows Marissa had insisted we needed, I realized something important. I'd just witnessed the death of my marriage, and I hadn't even gotten dessert. I've never been one of those guys who believes in signs from the universe or divine intervention or whatever spiritual mumbo-jumbo people talk about when they're trying to justify their bad decisions. But I'm pretty sure waking up the morning after your wife casually announces she's surgically removing any possibility of your future together is the universe's way of saying, "Hey buddy, time to update your address on your driver's license." The thing about sleeping next to someone who's just torpedoed your marriage is that it's profoundly uncomfortable in ways that have nothing to do with mattress firmness. Marissa was still asleep when I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, which was perfect because I had approximately zero interest in having a "let's talk about our feelings" conversation before I'd had coffee. Actually, scratch that. I had zero interest in having that conversation ever, with or without caffeine. I slipped out of bed like a Navy SEAL extracting from hostile territory, grabbed my phone, and headed straight for the garage. This was the part of the house that was actually mine, my workshop, my tools, my space that didn't have throw pillows with inspirational quotes about living, laughing, and loving. It smelled like sawdust and motor oil and honest work, which was a refreshing change from the lavender vanilla candles Marissa insisted on burning in every other room, because apparently our house needed to smell like a Bath and Body Works had exploded. I started pulling stuff off shelves, my good drill set, the circular saw Dad gave me before he died, my laptop, the level that had gotten me through more construction jobs than I could count. Each item went into a box with the kind of methodical precision that probably would have impressed a military recruiter. This wasn't emotional. This was logistics. This was strategy. This was me taking control of the one thing I still could, my exit. My phone buzzed. 6 in the morning, which meant it could only be one person. Dean. I answered, pressing the phone between my ear and shoulder while I wrapped a power drill in an old t-shirt. "Why are you awake?" my brother grunted, his voice thick with sleep and what I assumed was last night's whiskey. "Why are you awake?" I countered, because Dean was not a morning person. Dean was barely an afternoon person. "Your location pinged weird. Are you in your garage at 6 a.m.? Did you finally snap and decide to build a rocket ship?" "Right. I'd forgotten about the family location sharing thing Mom had insisted we all set up after Dad died, like being able to see our little dots on a map would somehow prevent future tragedies. Dean, being a divorce lawyer with trust issues and a subscription to every true crime podcast ever made, actually checked it regularly. Better, I said, tossing a box of drill bits into the growing pile. I'm leaving Marissa. The silence on the other end lasted approximately 3 seconds, which I'm pretty sure was a record for rendering my brother speechless. I'm sorry, what? Did you just say? Yep. She dropped the kid bomb last night. Hysterectomy. Forever child-free. The whole 9 yards. Well, technically the whole 0 yards, since we're not having kids, but you get it. Holy shit. I heard shuffling, then what sounded like Dean falling out of bed. Okay, I'm awake. I'm fully awake. She's done? Like done. This isn't some temporary freakout that you two can therapy your way through. Done. I confirmed, moving to my toolbox. She's known for a while apparently. Just decided our 5th anniversary was the perfect time to share. Jesus Christ, Rowan. That's... He paused, and I could practically hear his lawyer brain kicking into gear. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. First, are you safe? Am I safe? Dean, she didn't threaten me with a machete. She just doesn't want kids. Yeah, but people get crazy during breakups. Trust me, I've seen things. Last month I had a case where the wife tried to donate the husband's kidney while he was asleep. That's not even medically possible. That's not the point. The point is emotions make people stupid. Where are you going? I looked around the garage, at the camping gear in the corner, the hiking boots I hadn't worn in months because Marissa thought hiking was basically just walking but with more complaining. And suddenly I knew exactly where I was going. Boulder, I said. I've still got that condo from before we got married. Been renting it out, but the lease ended last month. Tenant moved out 2 weeks ago. Perfect. That's perfect. I heard the sound of Dean's laptop booting up because of course he was already working. This was why he made partner at 32. The man treated family crises like billable hours. Okay, listen to me very carefully. Colorado's a no-fault divorce state, which means nobody has to prove anybody did anything wrong. I know. You've explained this to literally everyone at every family gathering since you passed the bar. Hey, it's important information. People don't appreciate lawyers until they need one, and then suddenly we're heroes. He was typing now, fast. The condo's in your name only, right? Yeah, bought it before we got married. Good. What about the joint accounts? This was where things got interesting. Mostly my money. The inheritance from Dad's construction company. I kept it liquid for emergencies. And this qualifies as an emergency. Clean them out. Not all of it. Don't be a dick, but take what's yours. Colorado's an equitable distribution state, but that inheritance money is probably separate property anyway, since it was yours before the marriage. I'll need to check the specifics, but generally speaking. Dean, English, please. I didn't go to law school. Take your money and run. Leave her enough to not make you look like a complete asshole in court, but protect your assets. Think of it like this. You're not stealing, you're strategically relocating your financial resources. I had to hand it to him. The man could make anything sound legal and vaguely noble. By 7 a.m., I had 3 boxes packed, my truck loaded, and a plan. By 8, I was at the bank, moving money around while a very cheerful teller named Brenda made small talk about the weather and completely missed the fact that I was having a financial divorce at her window. I left Marissa enough to cover the mortgage for 3 months and her car payment because I'm not a monster, but everything else, the inheritance, my savings, the emergency fund, got transferred to an account she didn't have access to. Back at the house, Marissa was awake, standing in the kitchen with her coffee, looking at me with this expression that was half confusion and half something that might have been regret if I was being generous. "Where were you?" she asked, like this was a normal morning and not the aftermath of our relationship's funeral. "Bank," I said, walking past her to grab the houseplants from the living room. She had approximately 47 of them, each one named and cared for with more attention than she'd apparently been giving our marriage. "What are you doing with those?" "Leaving them. You're keeping the house, you keep the plants. They're all yours." I set them on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "Congratulations. You wanted things that don't talk back. You got M." Her face did this complicated thing where it couldn't decide between anger and tears. "Rowan, We need to talk about this. We need to figure out. Nothing to figure out, I said, heading for the door. You made your choice. I'm making mine. Dean's my lawyer. Have your lawyer call him. You already called a lawyer? It's been 12 hours. 13, actually. And yeah, I called my brother. You know, the divorce attorney you've met at every family barbecue for the past 5 years? That one. I made it to the truck, threw it in reverse, and was halfway down the street when my phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. A long one. I could see the preview. I need space to process what I'm feeling right now, and I think you should. I deleted it without reading the rest. If she needed space, well, she was about to have a whole lot of it. Here's something nobody tells you about leaving your wife. The aftermath is less dramatic movie montage of self-discovery and more eating cereal for dinner while questioning every life choice you've ever made. I'd been living in my Boulder condo for exactly 1 week, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the kind of silence that makes you wonder if you've gone deaf, when my phone buzzed with a message from the last person I expected to hear from. Haley Mitchell, Marissa's best friend since college. The artsy photographer with the septum piercing and the vintage band t-shirts who always looked vaguely uncomfortable at our dinner parties, like she was allergic to small talk and casserole dishes. We'd probably had a total of 15 actual conversations in the 5 years I'd known her, most of them revolving around, "Can you pass the wine?" and, "Yeah, the weather's crazy, right?" The message was short. "Hey Rowan, I know this is weird, but can we talk? I think you deserve to know some things." I stared at that text for a solid 5 minutes, trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. Was Marissa using her friend as a spy? Was this going to turn into one of those situations where I showed up, and suddenly there were intervention-style folding chairs and someone's sobbing mother? Because I'd seen enough Dr. Phil episodes during sick days to know how this could go sideways. But curiosity, that absolute bastard of an emotion, got the better of me. So I texted back, "Sure. Coffee." We met at this place called Ozo on Pearl Street, one of those Boulder coffee shops where everyone looks like they just came from a yoga class or are about to invent an app that'll disrupt the kombucha industry. It was neutral territory, public enough that if this turned into some kind of ambush, I could make a run for it without causing too much of a scene. Haley was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee in front of her, wearing a flannel shirt that looked like it had been stolen from a lumberjack's closet and jeans with paint stains on them. Her camera bag was on the floor next to her chair, because apparently photographers carry those things everywhere, like some kind of professional security blanket. "I got you a coffee," she said, sliding 1 cup toward me as I sat down. "Black, right? I remember you always refused the fancy stuff at parties." "Yeah, I believe coffee should taste like coffee, not a dessert that gave up on life." I took a sip. It was good. Strong. The kind of coffee that could wake up a corpse. "So, this is officially the weirdest week of my life, and you texting me is somehow in the top 3 strangest things that have happened." She winced, wrapping both hands around her own cup. "I know. I'm sorry. I probably should have led with that. I'm sorry about everything. About Marissa. About your marriage. About..." She paused, looking down at her coffee like it might have answers. "About the fact that I knew." "Knew what?" "That she was going to do it. The surgery talk. The whole thing." Haley looked up, and I could see she was genuinely uncomfortable, like she was confessing to a crime. "She told me about a month ago. Asked me what I thought. I told her she was insane and that she needed to talk to you like an actual adult. But she said..." She stopped, shaking her head. "She said what?" I pressed, leaning forward. This was getting interesting in that horrible, can't look away from a car crash kind of way. Haley took a deep breath, like she was about to jump off a cliff. "She said it was a test. The whole thing. She wanted to see how much you loved her. She thought if you really, truly loved her, you'd fight for her, beg her to reconsider, prove that you'd choose her over everything else, even your dreams of being a dad." I'm pretty sure my brain short-circuited. Like actual sparks and smoke. "I'm sorry, what?" "A test," Haley repeated, looking miserable. She's been reading these relationship books by some guru who thinks conflict is how you measure devotion, and she got it in her head that your marriage was too comfortable, too easy. She wanted drama. She wanted proof. She nuked our marriage for research purposes? My voice came out strangled, somewhere between a laugh and a scream. She blew up 5 years of my life because some self-help con artist told her that healthy relationships need more trauma? Essentially, yeah. Haley looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Look, I know I should have told you. I should have warned you. But she's my best friend, and I stupidly thought, that maybe she'd come to her senses before she actually went through with it. I didn't think she'd actually drop that bomb on your anniversary. I sat back, trying to process this information. My wife, ex-wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, whatever, had staged an entire emotional crisis as a loyalty test. She'd looked me in the eyes over $80 salmon and lied about something that fundamental, just to see if I'd grovel. And when I didn't, when I actually respected her stated choice like a functioning adult, I'd apparently failed her psychotic pop quiz. I started, then stopped because I genuinely didn't have words. That's the most manipulative, narcissistic, absolutely bats-hit thing I've ever heard. And I once worked on a construction site where a guy tried to convince everyone the moon landing was filmed in his uncle's garage. I know, Haley said quietly. I know it's insane. That's why I'm here. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve any of it. And I felt like, I don't know, like maybe you should know the truth before you spend the next year thinking you're the bad guy. Did she tell you the surgery wasn't real? I asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it. She hasn't had any surgery scheduled. She doesn't even have a doctor's appointment. Haley looked genuinely angry now, which was weird because I'd never seen her angry before. She was usually all zen energy and artistic contemplation. She thought you'd call her bluff. Thought you'd beg. When you didn't. When you just accepted it. She panicked. That's why she texted you that novel about needing space. She's trying to figure out her next move. Her next move? I repeated flatly. Like this is chess and not my actual life. Welcome to Marissa's world, Haley said with a bitter laugh. Everything's a performance. Everything's content for her mental Instagram highlight reel. I love her. I do. But sometimes I want to shake her and ask when she became this person who treats reality like a scripted drama. I took another long drink of coffee, using the time to organize my thoughts into something that resembled coherence. Why are you telling me this? You've been her friend for, what, 10 years? 12, actually, since sophomore year of college. She met my eyes, and there was something fierce in her expression. And in those 12 years, I've watched her pull stunts like this more times than I can count. Different boyfriends, different tests, different ways of manufacturing crisis, because she's addicted to intensity. But this, what she did to you, this crossed a line. You're not some college boyfriend she can play mind games with. You're her husband, or you were, and you deserve better. Turns out, having coffee with your ex-wife's best friend who just exposed her psychotic loyalty test becomes a regular thing. Who knew? Certainly not me, the guy who thought his biggest life drama would be choosing between hardwood and laminate flooring. But there I was, 3 days after our first coffee meeting, sitting across from Haley again at Ozo, listening to her explain the difference between aperture and shutter speed like it was going to be on a test I didn't sign up for. So the aperture is like the pupil of the camera's eye, she was saying, using her hands to make some kind of circle gesture that I'm pretty sure was supposed to be enlightening. It controls how much light gets in. F-stop numbers are inverse, so f/1.8 is actually a wider opening than f/16, which I know sounds backwards, but are you even listening? I'm listening. I lied, taking a sip of my coffee to hide the fact that my brain had checked out somewhere around inverse. It's just that you're speaking in wizard language, and I'm a simple carpenter who hits things with hammers for a living. She laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard in weeks that wasn't tinged with bitterness or divorced guy energy. Fair enough. I'll spare you the bouquet lecture then. The what now? Never mind. See, this is why I don't date guys in my field. Too much shop talk. She paused, then looked horrified. Not that we're. I didn't mean. I was speaking generally about hypothetical. Relax, I said, finding her awkwardness oddly endearing. I know what you meant. And for the record, I appreciate that you're trying to distract me with camera nerd stuff instead of asking me how I'm processing my feelings, or whatever. Oh God, did someone actually ask you that? My mom. 3 times yesterday. Also wanted to know if I was eating enough vegetables, and if I'd considered therapy with a nice Christian counselor she found on Facebook. Facebook therapy recommendations. That's like getting medical advice from a magic 8-ball. We fell into this pattern after that. Coffee twice a week, sometimes 3 times if the week was particularly brutal. Haley would tell me about her photography gigs. Weddings where the bride was a nightmare, corporate headshots where everyone looked like they were being held hostage, artsy projects that involved way too much philosophical discussion about capturing light's emotional texture, whatever the hell that meant. I'd tell her about the construction jobs I was picking up, the Boulder housing market being absolutely insane, and the DIY projects I was doing to make the condo feel less like a temporary witness protection situation. She was easy to talk to in a way that Marissa never had been. With Marissa, every conversation felt like a performance review where I was constantly being evaluated on metrics I didn't understand. With Haley, I could just exist. No tests, no hidden meanings, no wondering if saying the wrong thing about dinner plans was actually a referendum on our entire relationship. It was during one of these coffee sessions that she mentioned hiking. "Wait, you hike?" I asked, surprised. "I've never seen you at any of the trail events Marissa dragged me to." That's because Marissa thinks hiking is, and I quote, "poverty cardio for people who can't afford gym memberships." Haley rolled her eyes. She went to exactly 3 hikes in college, complained the entire time about bugs and sweat and nature being inconveniently outdoorsy, and decided it wasn't for her. I stopped inviting her sophomore year. "Poverty cardio," I repeated, laughing despite myself. That's so perfectly Marissa it hurts. She made me buy a Peloton instead. You know how much those things cost. I could have bought a decent used truck. Please tell me you kept the Peloton in the divorce. Nope. Left it in the living room as a monument to expensive mistakes. She can use it to hang her manipulative relationship guru laundry on. Haley snorted coffee out of her nose, which made both of us crack up like idiots until the barista gave us a look that suggested we were lowering the property values. "Okay, so here's a thought," Haley said once we'd recovered. "You want to go hiking this weekend? Actual hiking, not whatever performative nature walks Marissa subjected you to. There's this trail up near Netherland that's supposed to be amazing this time of year." I considered it. The idea of spending a Saturday doing something that wasn't unpacking boxes or having imaginary arguments with Marissa in my head was appealing. Plus, I'd actually missed hiking. Before the marriage became a full-time job of managing someone else's emotional chaos, I used to hit the trails every weekend. You know what? Yeah, let's do it. That Saturday, I picked Haley up at 7 in the morning because apparently that's when normal people start hikes, not at the civilized hour of 10 a.m. like Marissa always insisted. Haley showed up in hiking boots that actually looked used, not like the Instagram-ready ones Marissa bought, and wore exactly twice before declaring them blister machines designed by sadists. "Please tell me you brought real food and not just those fancy protein bars that taste like cardboard had a baby with disappointment," she said, climbing into my truck. "Trail mix, sandwiches, and those little cheese crackers that are definitely 90% chemicals and 10% nostalgia. You're my hero." The drive up to Netherland was beautiful in that aggressive Colorado way where the mountains just show off relentlessly. We talked about nothing important. Her terrible client from last week who wanted engagement photos that looked candid but also professionally lit, and also can you Photoshop us to look like we're in Bali even though we're in a park in Aurora. My neighbor who kept leaving passive-aggressive notes about my truck taking up too much space even though I was well within my designated parking spot. The trail itself was perfect. Not too crowded, decent elevation gain without being a death march. Views that made you understand why people moved to Colorado and then wouldn't shut up about it. We fell into an easy rhythm, the kind where you don't feel obligated to fill every silence with conversation. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we just walked, and both felt equally comfortable. About an hour in, I tripped over a root because I was too busy looking at the view and not enough at where I was putting my feet. Very graceful. Olympic-level coordination. "You good?" Haley asked, trying not to laugh. "Perfect. I meant to do that. Testing the ground stability." "Sure you were." She handed me some trail mix from her backpack. "Here, have some regret-flavored snacks." I took a handful, and she was right. Trail mix always somehow tasted like regret and raisins, which were basically the same thing. Why do they even put raisins in this stuff? Who actively wants a dried grape? Sociopaths and people who peaked in the 80s. We found a spot to rest on a fallen log that had a view of the Continental Divide doing its whole majestic thing. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the sound of wind through pine trees and some bird that was probably judging our hiking abilities. "Can I ask you something?" Haley said after a while, picking at the bark on the log. "Shoot. Did you ever feel like your marriage was real? Like, actually real, not performed? I thought about it, really thought about it, instead of giving some defensive knee-jerk answer. Honestly, looking back, I don't know anymore. There were moments that felt real. Probably were real, but there were way more that felt like we were acting out what a marriage was supposed to look like. Like we were both following a script nobody gave us, but everyone expected us to know. That's what it always looked like from the outside, Haley admitted. Like you two were starring in a rom-com that forgot to include the actual romance part. Everything was staged. The perfect date nights, the coordinated couple outfits, the social media posts about relationship goals. It was exhausting just watching it. You know what the really sad part is? I didn't even realize how exhausting it was until I left. Now I'm sitting on a log, eating trail mix that tastes like disappointment, talking to you about how fake my marriage was. And this is the most human I've felt in months. You know that thing where you think your life can't possibly get more complicated, and then the universe says, hold my beer and watch this. Yeah, that happened. Because apparently, leaving your manipulative wife and going on some perfectly innocent hikes with her best friend is grounds for being declared public enemy #1 in the greater Denver metropolitan area. It started with a text from my buddy Kyle. Well, former buddy Kyle, as it turned out. We'd been friends since college, did the whole fantasy football league thing, grabbed beers on Fridays, had that easy male friendship where you don't actually talk about feelings, but you show up when someone needs help moving furniture. He sent me a message at 11 on a Tuesday night that just said, "Dude, really?" I stared at those two words like they were written in ancient Sanskrit. Really what? Really I left my wife who staged a psychological experiment disguised as a marriage? Really I didn't feel like sticking around for more emotional manipulation? Really I had the audacity to drink coffee with another human being who happened to have a uterus? What are you talking about? I texted back. The response came fast. Marissa told everyone about you and Haley. That you left her for her best friend. That you've been cheating for months. Man, I thought you were better than that. And there it was. The other shoe, dropping from orbit like a nuclear warhead made of lies and social destruction. I called him immediately because some conversations require actual vocal confrontation, not passive-aggressive text bubbles. Kyle, what exactly did Marissa say? That you left her out of nowhere, that she found out you've been having an affair with Haley, that you've been lying to her for months. She's devastated, man. She showed us screenshots of you and Haley texting, meeting up for coffee. It's pretty damning. Screenshots of us getting coffee. I repeated slowly, my blood pressure doing interesting cardiovascular things. Coffee that started happening after I left. Coffee that's been completely platonic. Coffee that exists because Haley felt guilty about not warning me that my wife was playing psychological warfare games with our marriage. Look, I don't know what to believe, Kyle said, and I could hear the discomfort in his voice. But Marissa's really broken up about this. And the timing looks bad, you have to admit. The timing looks bad because she's making it look bad. She's a liar, Kyle. She lied about wanting a hysterectomy to test me. She's lying about this. But hey, don't let facts get in the way of a good narrative. He was quiet for a moment. I've known Marissa for 5 years too. She's always been cool. And now you're telling me she's this manipulative mastermind? That's a big accusation, man. And accusing me of cheating isn't? The friendship ended pretty much there. Oh, he didn't say it explicitly. We just did that thing where guys let relationships die through strategic avoidance and unreturned texts. But the real kicker came 3 days later when I checked our fantasy football group chat, the one we'd had running for 7 years, and discovered it had been renamed Just Us, and I'd been removed. 7 years of trash talk, draft day arguments, and celebration gifts, gone because my ex-wife was better at PR than I was at defending myself. The hits kept coming after that. My coworker Brett, who I'd done at least a dozen projects with, suddenly got very busy whenever I suggested grabbing lunch. The guys from my rec league softball team started acting weird, like I was carrying a contagious disease called probably a cheater. Even my barber, a guy who'd been cutting my hair for 3 years, gave me this look when I came in that suggested he'd been briefed on my moral failings. Heard about you and the wife, he said, in that careful tone people use when they're trying not to sound judgmental while absolutely judging you. That's rough, man. Yeah, it's something, I said, because what else do you say? Actually, funny story, she manufactured a crisis to test my devotion And when I didn't grovel, she decided to tell everyone I'm a cheater, so that's fun. He just nodded like I was confirming his worst suspicions, and I got the distinct impression my haircut was going to be slightly worse than usual out of principle. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was what happened to Haley. She called me on a Thursday afternoon, and I could hear something in her voice that I'd never heard before. Not quite tears, but close. The kind of emotional shrapnel that comes from being attacked by people who are supposed to be your friends. "You need to see this," she said. She sent me screenshots, Instagram DMs, Facebook messages, texts from mutual friends of hers and Marissa's. And they were brutal. Home-wrecking Lynn's goblin was actually one of the nicer ones. There were accusations, slut-shaming paragraphs that would have made a Victorian priest blush, and threats to tank her photography business by leaving one-star reviews everywhere. One message, from someone named Ashley who I vaguely remembered from one of Marissa's birthday parties, said, "You're a terrible person and an even worse friend. Marissa gave you everything, and you stabbed her in the back for some mediocre dick. Hope your camera breaks and your business fails." Mediocre dick. I wasn't even insulted. I was almost impressed by the specificity of the insult. "Haley, I'm so sorry," I said, and I meant it. This was my mess, or at least my ex-wife's mess, and Haley was catching shrapnel for the crime of being decent to me. This is insane. These people don't even know what actually happened. "No, they don't," she agreed, and I expected her to sound defeated. Expected her to say maybe we shouldn't hang out anymore, that the social cost was too high, that I wasn't worth losing her entire friend group over. Instead, she laughed. Not a bitter laugh or a crying disguised as laughter laugh. An actual, genuine, slightly unhinged laugh that suggested she'd moved past anger and arrived at some kind of transcendent acceptance of the absurdity. "What's funny?" I asked, confused. "Home-wrecking Lynn's goblin," she said, still laughing. "That's actually kind of creative. I mean, if I'm going to be a villain in Marissa's dramatic production, I might as well get good lighting for it, right?" And that's when I knew. That's the moment I realized Haley wasn't just some peripheral character in my divorce drama. She was tough in a way that had nothing to do with pretending to be tough. She could take hits and laugh about them. She could lose friends and not lose herself. "You're handling this better than I am," I admitted. "That's because I've known Marissa longer than you have. I've seen her burn through friendships before when people don't play their assigned roles in her life story. I'm just the latest casualty. But here's the thing." She paused, and I could hear her moving around, probably pacing her apartment. "I know who I am. I know what actually happened. And I know that anyone who believes her version without even asking for mine isn't actually my friend anyway. So really, she's doing me a favor. Spring cleaning my social circle. That's a very zen approach to being socially destroyed. Well, I do yoga on Tuesdays. Gotta use that inner peace for something." We talked for another hour, mostly me apologizing and her insisting she was fine, actually better than fine, because at least now she knew who her real friends were. The list was shorter than before, but apparently that's not always a bad thing. Here's a life pro tip nobody asked for. When your life resembles a dumpster fire that's somehow also a circus, the best thing you can do is run away to the mountains where cell service goes to die and your problems can't find you. Or at least that was the theory when Haley suggested we go camping to escape what she'd started calling the Marissa Media Circus. "We need to get out of town," she'd said during one of our coffee sessions, which had become less about coffee and more about commiserating over how many friends we'd lost in the Great Divorce War of 2024. Somewhere with no Wi-Fi, no cell service, no angry messages from people who've decided we're the villains in a story they don't even know. So, like Canada? I was thinking more like Rocky Mountain National Park, but I appreciate your commitment to extreme solutions. So there we were, the following weekend, loading up my truck with camping gear that hadn't seen daylight since before I got married. Marissa had always vetoed camping, saying something about how she didn't pay for a house with indoor plumbing just to voluntarily pee in the woods like our ancestors who didn't know any better. Which should have been a red flag, honestly. Anyone who thinks they're too sophisticated for Esmores has questionable priorities. Haley showed up at my place at 6 in the morning with a backpack that looked like it had been through several wars and possibly a zombie apocalypse, wearing a hoodie with holes in it and cargo pants that had more pockets than seemed structurally necessary. "Please tell me you packed more than just camera equipment," I said, eyeing her bag suspiciously. I've got a sleeping bag, a change of clothes, and 17 granola bars that expired last year, but are probably still fine. What else do you need? Literally anything else. Did you bring a tent? She blinked at me. I thought you were bringing the tent. This is how I learned that Haley, despite being an outdoor enthusiast, had always been a mooch who borrowed other people's camping gear. Which meant we were now sharing my two-person tent that I'd bought in college when I was significantly less aware of concepts like personal space and appropriate boundaries with your ex-wife's best friend. This is fine, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. We're adults. We can share a tent without it being weird. Totally not weird, she agreed, in that tone that suggested it was definitely going to be weird. The drive up was beautiful in that aggressive Colorado way that makes you forgive the state for having weather patterns designed by a sadistic meteorologist with a mood disorder. We took Highway 34 into the park, windows down, arguing about music because Haley apparently thought folk indie whatever qualified as real music, while I maintained that nothing made before 1990 counted as classic rock, no matter what she claimed. Bruce Springsteen is a legend, she argued, skipping through my truck's playlist with the confidence of someone who'd never been taught about boundaries. Bruce Springsteen sounds like someone's dad trying to be profound at a barbecue. You take that back right now, or I'm throwing your trail mix out the window. We got to the campsite around noon, and I immediately remembered why I'd loved camping before Marissa had civilized it out of me. The smell of pine trees and dirt, the sound of absolutely nothing except wind and birds that were probably plotting to steal our food, the complete absence of anyone asking me how I was processing or whether I'd considered therapy. Setting up camp took about an hour, mostly because Haley kept stopping to photograph things. The tent, a weird-looking rock, a squirrel she claimed had excellent bone structure for a rodent. I built a fire pit while she did her artist thing, and by the time the sun started setting, we had a pretty decent setup going. This is nice, Haley said, sitting on a log I'd dragged over, eating one of her questionable granola bars. No angry texts, no social media drama, no random people at the grocery store looking at me like I'm a home wrecker. Hey, you're a home-wrecking lens goblin. Get your villain title right. She threw a piece of granola at me. You know what I mean. It's just peaceful, like we can just exist without everyone having opinions about it. We cooked hot dogs over the fire because we're not fancy people, despite what the $80 anniversary steaks might have suggested. Talked about nothing important. Her weird clients, my weirder construction site stories, the philosophy of whether a hot dog counted as a sandwich. It didn't. We both agreed. And if you think otherwise, you're wrong. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped in that way Colorado does, where it's like the mountains suddenly remember it's their job to be inhospitable. We retreated to the tent around 9, both of us in sleeping bags, lying there in the kind of darkness that only exists when you're miles from civilization and light pollution. Can I ask you something? Haley's voice came from the darkness, quiet. Sure. Do you ever wonder if we're doing this wrong? Like, becoming friends during your divorce, hanging out all the time, letting people think whatever they want to think. I thought about it, really thought about it. Honestly, no. People are going to think what they want regardless. And everyone who actually matters, or at least everyone worth keeping around, will either figure out the truth or won't care enough to make it their business. That's very mature of you. Yeah, well, divorce ages you. I'm basically 100 years old in emotional intelligence years now. She laughed, and then went quiet. I could hear her sleeping bag rustling as she shifted around, trying to get comfortable on ground that was definitely not designed with human spines in mind. That's when the rain started. Not gentle rain, not romantic movie rain. This was the kind of rain that suggested the sky was having a breakdown and needed everyone to know about it. Thunder cracked overhead like God was rearranging furniture, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees just for fun. Tell me this tent is waterproof, Haley said, her voice slightly panicked. Define waterproof. Rowan, it's mostly waterproof, like 70%. The tent was actually fine. I'd sealed it properly because I'm not an idiot, but the storm was intense enough that we both instinctively moved closer to the center, away from the edges where rain was starting to do that thing where it finds microscopic entry points just to prove it can. We ended up sitting cross-legged in our sleeping bags, facing each other in the weird, intimate darkness that only exists in tents during storms. Haley pulled out her phone for light, and in the glow, I could see her hair was doing that thing where humidity turns it into something with its own zip code. "So this is cozy," she said, trying for humor, but landing somewhere near nervous. "Yeah, nothing says romance like being trapped in nylon while nature throws a tantrum." I paused. "Wait, not romance. I meant nothing says friendship? Platonic tent sharing." Smooth. Really nailed the landing on that one. Another crack of thunder, close enough that I felt it in my chest. Haley jumped slightly, and I realized she'd moved even closer. We were maybe a foot apart now, close enough that I could see the way her eyes reflected the phone light. Close enough that this was definitely entering territory that wasn't strictly just friends hiding from weather. "I hate thunder," she admitted quietly. "Have since I was a kid. My dad used to tell me it was just clouds bumping into each other, but that never made it less terrifying. Clouds with anger management issues." She laughed, but it was shaky. "Yeah, aggressive clouds." We sat there for a while, listening to the rain assault our tent like it had personal beef with waterproof fabric. The wind was picking up too, making the whole structure shudder and flex in ways that were probably fine, but felt vaguely apocalyptic. "Can I tell you something?" Haley said suddenly, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Is it about how we're probably going to die out here, and you want to confess your crimes?" "No, you idiot." She took a breath, and even in the dim light, I could see she looked nervous. Actually nervous. Not her usual cool photographer who's seen everything nervous. "I think, God, this is going to sound insane. The timing is terrible. You're literally in the middle of a divorce, and I'm losing friends over even knowing you, and this is possibly the worst moment in human history to say this. But, Haley, I think I'm falling for you." The words hung there in the tent, competing with the thunder for which could make my heart do more interesting acrobatics. I stared at her, my brain doing that thing where it tries to process information but keeps buffering like bad Wi-Fi. "You what?" "I know," she said quickly, words tumbling out like she'd been holding them in too long, and they were making a break for freedom. "I know it's a disaster. I know everyone already thinks we've been having an affair, and this would just confirm it. And I know you're dealing with enough without me dropping this on you in a tent during a literal storm, like some kind of rom-com written by someone who failed subtlety class. But I can't. I can't keep pretending I don't feel it." "How long?" I managed to ask. She laughed, but it sounded almost sad. "Honestly, I think since that first coffee. Maybe before. There was always something about you that felt, I don't know, real? Like you were the only person in Marissa's orbit who wasn't performing all the time. Even when you were clearly miserable at her dinner parties, you were genuinely miserable, not fake polite miserable. And then when we started hanging out, and you were funny and kind and didn't treat me like some weird artsy accessory, and you actually listened when I talked about photography stuff even though I know you don't care about aperture. I care a little bit about aperture. You absolutely do not. Okay, you're right, I don't. But I care that you care about it. She went quiet, and I realized I needed to say something. Needed to respond to this confession that she'd just dropped in the middle of a thunderstorm like a grenade made of feelings. The thing was, I'd been actively not thinking about this. About the way my day felt better when I knew I was going to see her. About how her laugh had become my favorite sound. About how somewhere between hike number 3 and her roasting my dad's sneakers, which were perfectly functional, thank you very much, I'd started looking forward to coffee dates more than I'd looked forward to anything in years. I'd written it off as post-divorce rebound feelings, as gratitude for having someone in my corner, as literally anything except what it actually was. "I think I've been falling for you too," I said, and the words felt both terrifying and honest in a way I hadn't felt in years. I didn't want to admit it because the timing is insane and everyone already hates us, and I'm technically still married for another few months, and this feels like the kind of thing that only happens in movies written by people who've never experienced actual human complications. But I can't keep pretending either. And honestly, somewhere between you calling yourself a lens goblin and right now, I realized I'd already fallen. Past tense. Done deal. I'm just an idiot who didn't notice until you said it out loud. She was close enough now that I could feel her breath, could see the way she was looking at me like I was something worth capturing on film. The tent shuddered again, rain hammering down, and I thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. The divorce wasn't final. Everyone already thought we were villains. My ex-wife was her ex-best friend. The social fallout would be nuclear. We'd known each other for barely 2 months in any real capacity. And then I thought, screw it. I kissed her. Not some dramatic movie kiss with a soundtrack and perfect choreography. This was we're sitting in sleeping bags in a tent that smells like wet nylon and possibly regret kiss. Awkward angles, bumped noses, the kind of kiss where you're figuring it out as you go. And it was perfect. She kissed me back, her hand coming up to my face, and for a moment the storm outside didn't matter. The drama, the accusations, the friends we'd lost, none of it mattered. There was just this moment of something real in the middle of everything fake that had come before. When we pulled apart, she was smiling. Not her polite smile or her professional photographer smile, but something genuine and slightly stunned. So, she said. So, I echoed. This is happening. Appears to be. Everyone's going to lose their minds. They already have. Might as well give them something real to lose it over. She laughed and kissed me again, and outside the storm raged on. But inside our ridiculous two-person tent that definitely wasn't meant for whatever this was becoming, I felt the most at peace I'd been in years. For the record, Haley said, settling back into her sleeping bag but staying close. This is the best thunderstorm of my life. Same, I agreed. And I once saw one that knocked out power for 3 days and gave me an excuse to skip a work conference. Romantic. I'm a romantic guy. It's my whole thing. She reached over and took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. Your whole thing is building stuff and making sarcastic comments. I contain multitudes. We fell asleep like that, hands linked between sleeping bags, while the storm eventually wore itself out and Colorado remembered how to be peaceful again. And when I woke up in the morning with my back absolutely destroyed from sleeping on the ground and Haley snoring softly beside me, I realized something important. Sometimes the best things in your life start in the worst possible circumstances, with the worst possible timing, in the worst possible two-person tent. Best thunderstorm of my life indeed. 6 months is apparently the magic number for your life to go from complete dumpster fire to actually pretty decent, which nobody tells you when you're in the middle of the dumpster fire part. 6 months after that camping trip, after that thunderstorm confession that changed everything, I found myself standing on top of Mount Elbert at sunrise with a ring in my pocket and a plan that was either incredibly romantic or incredibly stupid. Knowing me, probably both. The divorce had finalized 3 weeks earlier, which was faster than expected because Marissa had apparently gotten bored with the whole process once she realized I wasn't going to fight her or beg or give her the dramatic confrontation she'd probably been hoping for. Dean, my lawyer brother who'd somehow managed not to say, "I told you so" more than 15 times throughout the entire process, had called me with the news while I was in the middle of installing cabinets at a job site in Thornton. "It's done," he'd said. "You're officially a free man." Well, free-ish. There's paperwork and bureaucracy, and the state of Colorado needs to process things. But legally speaking, you're divorced. That's it. No final boss battle. No dramatic courtroom scene. This isn't Suits, Rowan. Most divorces end with a whimper and some signatures, not a monologue. Though I will say, Marissa's lawyer seemed relieved to be done with her. Apparently, she kept trying to add clauses about you not being allowed to tarnish her reputation on social media. Her reputation tarnished itself. I didn't even have to help. Yeah, well, her lawyer agreed with you, which is why that particular clause didn't make it into the final agreement. Congratulations, by the way. You're now the proud owner of your freedom and significantly less money than you started with. Worth it, I'd said, and meant it. Haley and I had been officially together for those 6 months, though officially is a weird word when everyone already assumed you'd been together from the start. We'd stopped caring what people thought around month 2, right about the time someone left a 1-star review on Haley's photography business calling her an immoral homewrecker with mediocre composition skills. And she'd responded by posting the review on her Instagram with the caption, "At least my lighting is good though," and gotten about 100 new clients from it. The people who mattered, my brother Dean, Haley's dad who was a retired firefighter with the personality of a friendly bear, a handful of friends who'd actually asked for our side of the story, had stuck around. Everyone else had filtered themselves out, which turned out to be less of a loss and more of a spring cleaning we didn't know we needed. So there I was, at 14,000 feet, watching the sun come up over the Rockies and trying not to pass out from altitude sickness, while Haley took approximately 300 photos of the sunrise, because apparently this was golden hour, and the light quality is insane up here, and other photography phrases that I'd learned to nod along to. You know what would make this light even better? I said, my hand closing around the ring box in my jacket pocket. Better cloud definition? She said, still looking through her camera viewfinder. You married to me. She lowered the camera slowly, turning to look at me with this expression that was half, did you just say what I think you said, and half, are you proposing to me on a mountain because you know I'm obsessed with dramatic lighting? Did you just? I pulled out the ring box, got down on one knee on a rock that was definitely going to leave a mark, and tried to remember the speech I practiced. Haley Mitchell, you're the only person I know who would call herself a lens goblin and mean it as a point of pride. You're weird, you're talented, you laugh at my dumb jokes, and you make me feel like I'm not insane for wanting simple, honest things in life. Also, your photography genuinely is incredible, even though I still don't understand aperture. It's the f-stop that. Haley, I'm proposing. You can explain camera mechanics later. She laughed, and I could see tears in her eyes, which on anyone else might have been concerning, but on her just looked right. Okay, continue. Will you marry me? Preferably soon. Before I freeze to death on this mountain, I climbed specifically because you said the lighting would be good. You climbed this mountain for me. I climbed this mountain for you. My lungs hate me and my legs are filing for divorce. Too soon. But yeah, dramatic lighting. Romantic gesture. The whole thing. She tackled me, which at 14,000 feet with questionable oxygen is actually a safety hazard, but I wasn't about to complain. Yes, she said, kissing me hard enough that I forgot about altitude sickness entirely. Yes, obviously yes, you beautiful idiot. I got the ring on her finger, a simple silver band with a small diamond because Haley had explicitly said if I bought her anything that looked like it came from a K Jewelers commercial, she'd throw it off a mountain. And we took approximately 75 selfies with the sunrise and the ring and her crying laughing face before hiking back down to civilization. We eloped 2 weeks later at Garden of the Gods because Haley said if we were going to get married, we should do it somewhere with geological drama, and I pointed out the poetic irony of getting married in a place with garden in the name considering how my first marriage ended at Garden and Grace. She'd laughed and said that was exactly why we should do it. Take the location back, make new memories, prove that gardens weren't cursed, just my ex-wife was. The ceremony was just us, an officiant we found on Craigslist who turned out to be a retired geology professor with strong opinions about sedimentary rock formations, and a photographer friend of Haley's who owed her a favor. No fancy dress, no tuxedo, no 300-person guest list of people we barely knew. Just us, the Red Rocks, and vows we wrote ourselves on the drive over. No lies, I said. No tests, she added. No Marissa, we said together, and the officiant looked confused but continued anyway. We moved her stuff into my Boulder condo that weekend, which mostly consisted of camera equipment, vintage band t-shirts, and approximately 40 houseplants that she promised she'd actually keep alive this time. She converted my spare bedroom into a photo studio, complete with lighting equipment that looked like it belonged on a spaceship and backdrops in colors I didn't know existed. I kept building furniture in the garage, tables, chairs, a bookshelf that was slightly crooked but had character, and she'd photograph each piece for her Instagram, turning my hobby into content. We were basically Pinterest goals, except with more sarcasm and better lighting. Life was good, simple, real. We'd wake up, make terrible coffee, work our respective jobs, come home to each other. No drama, no tests, no performances. Just existence with someone who actually liked existing with me. 3 months into married life, Haley walked into the garage where I was sanding down a coffee table and said, "I'm pregnant." I looked up, saw her holding what appeared to be several positive pregnancy tests, and my brain did that thing where it tries to process information but gets stuck buffering. "You're pregnant. Very pregnant. Like, really pregnant. How pregnant are we talking?" "Twins pregnant." The sander slipped from my hand, hit the floor with a thud. "I'm sorry, twins." She was crying and laughing at the same time, showing me the ultrasound photo on her phone. 2 heartbeats. 2 tiny humans. Because apparently the universe looked at our life and said, "You know what these 2 need? Double trouble." I pulled her into a hug, getting sawdust all over her shirt, my own eyes getting suspiciously wet. "We're having twins. We're having twins, she confirmed. Think you can build 2 cribs? I can build anything, I said. That's literally my job. Good. Because we're going to need so much furniture. Like, an unreasonable amount of furniture. And standing there in my garage-turned-workshop, holding my wife who was apparently growing 2 humans, covered in sawdust and happiness, I realized something. This was it. This was the life I'd been trying to build with the wrong person. But now I had the right person, and twins on the way, and a future that actually felt like mine. Best mistake I ever made was ordering that salmon at Garden and Grace. Easter Sunday, the one holiday where people pretend they aren't silently judging each other's deviled eggs and family dynamics. Haley's grandma, Eleanor, was hosting brunch at her estate in Colorado Springs, and I swear to God, this woman ran her house like a courtroom with doilies. Retired judge, early 80s, and sharp enough to cross-examine a brick wall into confessing. She had that kind of energy that made you sit up straight, even when you were innocent. Haley and I had been married for a few months, and life was solid. Smooth, even. Our little Boulder bubble had become this peaceful mix of wood shavings, camera flashes, and arguments about whose turn it was to buy oat milk. And now here we were, driving through the mountains, me in a painfully pastel shirt Haley picked out. It's Easter, not a funeral, Mason, her glowing with that subtle, pregnant and pretending not tired smile. The plan was simple. Announce the pregnancy to the family in the most Haley way possible, with a photo album that could make Pinterest cry. Each page was a chapter of our new life. The mountain proposal, the garden of the gods wedding, our condo, my handmade crib, and finally, the ultrasound picture, the grand finale. You could practically hear a drum roll when she packed it in her bag that morning. We arrived, and the place looked like Martha Stewart and the Supreme Court had a baby. Lace tablecloths, golden napkin rings, everything symmetrical like Eleanor personally yelled at the decorations until they aligned. The woman was sipping rose before 10 a.m., which, honestly, I respected. Haley, Mason, she greeted, arms outstretched. My 2 favorite people who still respect punctuality. Haley hugged her. We brought a surprise. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Please tell me it's not another abstract art photo of furniture. Better, Haley said, grinning. You'll see. Families started pouring in like a sitcom cast reunion. Cousins, aunts, that one uncle who still calls everyone sport. It was chaos, but the good kind. Laughter, champagne glasses clinking, and the smell of glazed ham strong enough to make me rethink vegetarianism. And then, the doorbell rang. Now, every story has that one moment when you just know. You feel the plot twist walking toward you. My gut twisted before my brain even caught up. Eleanor called out, Haley, dear, were we expecting another guest? Haley frowned. No. She opened the door, and there she was. Marissa, my ex-wife, dressed like she was auditioning for the Real Housewives of Emotional Damage. Designer sunglasses, wind-blown hair, a coat too heavy for spring, and a smirk that screamed, I came to ruin the vibe. Happy Easter, she said, brushing past me like she owned the place. Haley froze. I froze harder. You could have heard a deviled egg drop. Eleanor, to her credit, didn't flinch. Ah, she said, tilting her head. The ghost of bad decisions passed. Haley tried to stay calm. Marissa, this is a family brunch. Marissa shrugged. I was family, until he traded up. I swear, if I had popcorn, I would have started eating it. The tension was that thick. Haley, bless her heart, decided to go through with the announcement anyway. She was shaking a little but determined. That's Haley for you. She placed the photo album in the center of the table and said, Before we eat, I wanted to share something special. The family leaned in. Page by page, she narrated our story. The proposal photo, smiles and sunlight. The elopement picture, us laughing by the rocks. The ultrasound, a collective gasp, then cheers and happy tears. Eleanor clapped her hands. Twins. My courtroom legacy continues. Everyone toasted. Everyone except Marissa. She sat there, staring at the album like it had personally insulted her. Then she stood up, slow and dramatic, her chair scraping across the marble floor like a thunderclap. You stole my life, she screamed. I swear, every fork froze midair. Even the ham looked nervous. Haley blinked. Excuse me. You think this is fair? Marissa's voice cracked. You get him. You get this. You get the happy ending that was supposed to be mine? Marissa, I said, trying to stay calm. We've been divorced for. Don't, she snapped. Don't you dare act innocent, Mason. You were supposed to fight for me. The room went dead silent. You could practically hear Eleanor sharpening a metaphorical gavel in her mind. Haley, to her credit, didn't lose her cool. You ended things, Marissa. You made your choices. Marissa laughed, a wild, brittle sound. Choices? You call emotional surgery a choice? Eleanor stood up then, slow and steady, her wine glass in hand like a weapon of divine authority. She slammed it down so hard it echoed. Young lady, she said, her voice booming through the dining room. Sit down before I hold you in contempt of brunch. I almost choked on my mimosa. Haley's cousin whispered, Did she just? Yep, I muttered. She did. But Marissa didn't back down. Nope. She lunged, actually lunged, for the photo album. Like it was evidence she needed to destroy before the jury saw it. Eleanor's grandson, Ben, 6'3", ex-football player, moved faster than a referee at a bad call. He grabbed her by the arm mid-swipe. Ma'am, maybe not today. Let me go, she yelled, kicking off one of her heels. This is MY's story. Not anymore. Eleanor said, sipping her rose like this was just another episode of Judge Judy, Easter edition. Haley stood frozen, one hand on her stomach, the other on the chair. I stepped in front of her, not out of fear, just instinct. Protection. Marissa finally broke down, tears streaking her perfect makeup. He was supposed to love me forever. Eleanor sighed. Honey, sometimes forever expires early when you treat people like disposable evidence. Half the family winced, half applauded quietly like they were watching live theater. I wanted to say something, anything, but there's no instruction manual for your ex crashing your new wife's pregnancy announcement. Eventually, Marissa yanked her arm free, grabbed her heel off the floor, and stormed out, muttering something about fake happiness and karma. The front door slammed so hard the Easter wreath fell off. Silence. Pure, holy silence. Then Eleanor clapped once. Well, she said, that was more exciting than last year's egg hunt. Haley exhaled. I'm so sorry, Grandma. Nonsense, Eleanor replied, pouring herself another glass. If you can't handle an emotional outburst before dessert, you're not ready for family. The entire room erupted in laughter, like the tension never happened. That's Eleanor for you, the kind of woman who could turn chaos into etiquette. Later, while everyone went back to chatting, Haley leaned into me and whispered, So much for a peaceful Easter. I grinned. Hey, at least no one threw the ham. She smiled faintly, her eyes tired but soft. Do you think she'll stop? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at the front door, still swinging slightly from the impact, and said, If she doesn't, Grandma Justice will make sure she does. Haley laughed, kissed my cheek, and for a brief moment, despite the insanity, everything felt okay again. Because sometimes peace doesn't mean quiet. Sometimes peace means you survive the noise together and laugh about it over cold deviled eggs. If you've never seen someone spiral in real time, let me introduce you to Marissa's post-Easter World Tour of Chaos. I call it the Breakdown Tour, and it had more drama, travel, and audience participation than Taylor Swift's Eras Tour, minus the talent and the ticket sales. It started small. A few weird texts, a random, you'll regret this voicemail I deleted before finishing breakfast, and a cryptic Instagram story captioned, He built her a home with what he chopped from my trust. Whatever that meant. I figured she'd get bored and move on. Wrong. She doubled down like a poker player with nothing left to lose but pride and a shared Amazon password. One Monday morning, I got to a job site in downtown Denver, a high-end cabin build I was overseeing, and there she was, sitting in her car across the street like a low-budget detective. Sunglasses on, latte in hand, glaring at me like I'd stolen her Netflix login. I pretended not to see her, walked inside, and told my crew, if a woman in a white Lexus asks for me, tell her I'm moved to Guam. But the next week, Haley came home crying. Her camera gear, her livelihood, was trashed. Someone had keyed her car, smashed a lens, and left a note that said, He'll ruin you too. It didn't take a forensic team to figure out who the culprit was. Haley wasn't the dramatic type. She cried once, quietly, then pulled herself together and did what she always does, turned pain into art. 2 days later, she uploaded a series of photos, the shattered lens, the scratched camera, and a self-portrait in the reflection of a broken mirror. Caption: some people break things, others rebuild. That post went viral overnight. We're talking full-blown internet applause. Wedding planners, artists, influencers, they all flooded her comments with love and sympathy. The bookings poured in. Every bride in a 50-mile radius suddenly wanted the photographer who turns heartbreak into beauty. Meanwhile, Marissa kept self-destructing. She started posting quotes about toxic masculinity and gaslighting alongside our wedding photos. The same pictures I deleted months ago, now repurposed with captions like, "He smiled in pictures, but lied in vows." She was basically curating a one-woman museum of delusion. I tried ignoring her. You'd think that would help, right? Nope. It just made her louder. She showed up at Haley's studio once, pretending to be a client. Haley told me she walked in wearing sunglasses like she was in witness protection and said, "I need someone to capture the real me." Haley, being the calm, non-violent saint she is, said, "The real you isn't my aesthetic," and escorted her out before she could monologue. That's when Eleanor stepped in, Grandma Justice herself. Retired judge, cardigan assassin, professional chaos manager. She called us over for tea, which, in Eleanor speak, meant we're launching a legal missile. She poured her drink, leaned back, and said, "We're going to civilize this circus." Within a week, she'd done what most people need a legal team for. Temporary restraining orders, harassment filings, even a report to Marissa's employer. Eleanor didn't just pull strings, she crocheted an entire safety net. At one point, she called me and said, "Mason, I once handled a divorce case where a man mailed his ex a live raccoon. This isn't my first rodeo." The woman was terrifying, in the best possible way. By month 3 of the Breakdown Tour, Marissa had lost her job. Turns out HR departments don't love viral harassment posts, and her brother Marcus finally called me. Marcus and I had always been civil during the marriage. He's a good guy, just perpetually caught in the middle of his sister's main character episodes. He sounded tired. "Man, I think my sister's lost it." "You think?" I said. "I'm starting to believe she's doing a world record attempt. I'm sorry about all this. She's not herself." "Buddy," I said, "she's been auditioning for Not Herself since 2019. We talked for an hour. He told me she'd been drinking too much, ranting about stolen destiny, and apparently telling people she'd had a surgery relapse. Which is impressive, considering the first one never happened. Through all of it, Haley never cracked. Not once. I expected stress, anger, maybe some regret for marrying a man whose ex thought she was the Joker with Wi-Fi access. Instead, she kept building, photographing, laughing. Let her spiral, Haley said one night while editing pictures. Storms burn themselves out eventually. And if she doesn't? I asked. Haley smiled without looking up. Then we build better umbrellas. That woman could turn therapy into a business plan. Our days became a rhythm of creation and quiet defiance. I worked on custom furniture pieces. She turned them into art. People loved the story behind it, the craftsman and the photographer who made beauty out of brokenness. It was disgustingly wholesome. Even I almost teared up reading her captions. Eleanor dropped by once a week to check the perimeter, which basically meant bringing cookies and legal updates. The judge approved the order, she'd announce, handing me snickerdoodles. "Now eat. You look less intimidating when you're underfed." Meanwhile, Marissa's social media rants grew less coherent. She started quoting philosophers, misquoting therapists, and tagging random celebrities for moral support. My personal favorite post read, "They say love builds bridges. He built furniture instead." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. But beneath the humor, there was sadness. She wasn't just being cruel, she was unraveling. The woman who once planned our future down to the color of the nursery was now posting conspiracy threads about how Haley hypnotized me with her camera lens. Part of me pitied her. The other part remembered every lie, every test, every manipulation, and thought, no, this is her own construction zone of chaos. Then came the final act of her tour, one last attempt to make a statement. We woke up one morning to a news alert. Local woman detained after disturbance at City Hall. You guessed it, Marissa. She'd marched into the clerk's office demanding they revoke the fraudulent marriage certificate between me and Haley. Apparently, she believed the divorce was emotionally invalid. Eleanor saw the article, sipped her tea, and said, "Well, that's one way to spend a Thursday." That incident finally pushed everything into the legal finish line. Marissa was ordered into therapy, given a no-contact mandate, and relocated to California with her parents for a change of scenery. Translation: witness protection from herself. When the dust settled, I sat on the back porch one night, staring at the stars over Boulder. Haley joined me, her belly starting to show. She placed my hand over it. "They're kicking," she whispered. I smiled. "Already fighting for space, huh? Takes after Grandma Justice." Haley laughed, and for the first time in months, the air felt still again. No courtrooms, no chaos, just us, wood and light, and a quiet future we were building piece by piece. Sometimes I think back to that Easter table, to the woman screaming about stolen lives, and realize she wasn't wrong about everything. I did steal something from her, the piece she threw away, and I wasn't giving it back. Because if Marissa's breakdown tour was about destruction, ours was about rebuilding. And judging by the kicks under my hand, the next generation was already getting ready for the encore. There's a special kind of peace that comes after chaos, the kind where your life feels like it's been washed clean, but you can still see the faint outlines of the mess that used to be there. That's where Haley and I were. The workshop smelled like cedar and hope. Her studio was buzzing with new clients. And the court order against Marissa had been so ironclad that even her shadow wasn't allowed within 100 feet of our property line. Life was good, quiet, predictably boring, and I loved it. Then came the knock. It was a Wednesday night, somewhere between Netflix autoplay next episode and, let's call it, early bedtime because adulthood. Haley was 8 months pregnant, glowing in that I'm tired but excited kind of way. I was sanding a crib I'd been working on, handcrafted, solid maple, my best work yet. Then, 3 sharp knocks. Not the polite kind, either. The kind that announces, "Trouble's back," and she knows your address. Haley looked up from her laptop. "You expecting anyone?" "Only DoorDash," I said, wiping my hands. And he usually doesn't sound that judgmental. I opened the door, and there she was, Marissa. Thinner, paler, and somehow older than 6 months should make a person. Her eyes were glassy, her hands trembling around a half-folded piece of paper. "Mason," she said softly, "I needed to talk to you." Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't." But Haley was right behind me, her hand on my back. "It's okay," she whispered. "Let's hear it." Marissa's voice cracked. "The surgery, it wasn't real." I blinked. "Come again." "I made it up," she confessed, tears already welling. "I wanted to test if you'd fight for me." I stood there, staring like my brain had blue-screened. "You faked a life-threatening surgery as a relationship quiz." She nodded, sobbing now. "I thought, if you still loved me, you'd come running. I just wanted proof." But then everything spiraled, and I couldn't stop lying. Haley stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "That wasn't a test, Marissa. That was emotional arson." Marissa turned to her, broken. "I'm sorry. For everything. For the party, for the posts, for..." Haley held up a hand. "You don't owe us an apology. You owe yourself therapy." I exhaled slowly, fighting that weird cocktail of pity and disbelief. "Congratulations," I said finally. "You passed the test for how to end a marriage in one move." Marissa's shoulders shook. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "That's the problem," I said. "You never mean it. You just do it, and then expect applause for regret." Haley's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "Marissa, it's over. You need to let go." Marissa nodded, wiped her tears, and whispered, "I know." Then she turned and walked away, down the driveway, into the dark. No screaming, no chaos, just silence. And somehow, that was worse. Haley closed the door, leaned against it, and sighed. "Do you think she's okay?" I thought about that for a second. Maybe someday. But right now, she's just done. That night, we didn't talk much. We didn't need to. I crawled into bed next to Haley, rested my hand on her belly, and felt one of the twins kick. Life was reminding me where to keep my focus, forward. 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that smelled like coffee and hospital sanitizer, the universe decided to balance the scales again. Leo and Mila arrived, 2 tiny bundles of chaos that somehow made every hard moment worth it. Haley was incredible. Calm, radiant, a total pro. Me? I cried like a guy in a Pixar movie. Watching her hold them for the first time, whispering their names, I realized something. I'd spent years trying to fix broken things. Now, for once, I'd built something whole. The workshop became the heart of our home. By day, I built furniture for clients. By night, I built forts and rocking chairs for my kids. Sawdust and baby powder. It's a weird combo, but it smells like redemption. Haley turned her small hands, big dreams, project into something beautiful. Every Saturday, we'd invite neighborhood kids over to learn woodworking. She'd photograph them holding their birdhouses and little stools, all smiles and glue stains. The photos went viral again, this time not because of pain, but because of joy. People messaged her things like, "You turned trauma into purpose." She'd smile and say, "No, we just traded drama for hammers." Eleanor came by every weekend, of course. She'd bring cookies, judge my joinery techniques, and hold the twins like she was conducting court. "Order in the nursery," she'd joke. One bottle at a time. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. We laughed, we worked, we napped in shifts like exhausted Marines. And through it all, that quiet peace stayed, like the universe was finally done testing me. Then one afternoon, I caught myself wondering about Marissa. Curiosity, not longing. Just that human itch to know if the storm you survived is still raining somewhere else. Haley noticed, because she always does. "What's got you staring at nothing?" she asked. "Just wondering how she's doing," I admitted. Haley didn't miss a beat. "Curiosity isn't love, Mason. It's just checking the weather on a storm you already survived." I laughed. "You always gotta sound like a philosopher on Tuesdays." She smirked. "Only when I'm right." And she was. Marissa wasn't my unfinished story anymore. She was a closed chapter, filed, stamped, and archived in the Department of Lessons Learned. Later that evening, while feeding the twins, I thought about everything that had happened. The fake surgery, the meltdown brunch, the stalking, the apology. And weirdly, I didn't feel bitterness anymore. Just relief. Because sometimes, closure doesn't come in the form of justice. Sometimes it's just the quiet realization that you don't need revenge, you just need to stop caring. Haley caught me zoning out and said, "Hey, Earth to Mason, you thinking about sanding something again?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Just life." She rolled her eyes, but smiled back. "Well, try not to glue yourself to it." Weeks turned into months. Leo learned how to grab my beard like it was a jungle vine. Mila learned how to scream with the confidence of a future CEO. And Haley? She was thriving, booked out for months, glowing like motherhood was her art medium. Sometimes, when the twins finally napped, I'd sneak into the workshop, pour myself a drink, and just sit there, listening to the hum of the house. That peaceful kind of noise that tells you you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And in those moments, I'd think about balance. How life gives and takes like a moody accountant. Marissa gave me clarity. Haley gave me everything else. I didn't need to prove I'd won. I didn't need to parade happiness online. The real victory was waking up next to peace, not panic. Still, sometimes I imagine running into Marissa one day. Maybe at a cafe, maybe at an airport. She'd smile awkwardly, I'd nod politely, and we'd both move on. Two people who once set fire to each other's plans and now just live in the ashes of acceptance. But that's a story I'll never need to tell. Because the only thing that matters now is the one I'm living, one crib at a time, one laugh at a time, one Saturday project at a time. And every time I tuck the twins in and hear Haley humming softly in the next room, I know it. Karma didn't come to punish anyone. It came to balance me out.